Yeah, hi guys. My name is Uday. I work at Walmart. I have been using Angular from 1.x and I recently moved on to React. And I also occasionally do tech blogging and beginner open source contributor. So since I moved to React, I don't want to miss Angular. So this is a way, some of the ways that I, keeping my knowledge back to the Angular. So today we are going to see. We're going to actually release a library, and let's see how to do that. So these are the 3 steps that's all needed for publishing a library. So you do npm init, and then you might create an index file that does something, and then you do npm publish. That's all, right? So then what's all the talk is about? So in fact, yeah, these are the 3 steps that we need in fact. But in order to create a quality library, and in order to follow some of the best practices which adhere to the Angular, Angular specific libraries, we need to do a few things. So what are those things and how to create a quality library, we will see. So this anyway I'm not going to do. So the agenda is library planning. So how and why you need to think about an Angular library, and setting up your local workspace specific to Angular library. When you want to create a library along with a demo app, you need to do a few things. So that we'll see. And then documentation, and I don't have to say about it. Everybody needs a good documentation in order to be library usable, right? And then automation. And CICD, we see what it is, and finally the bonus thing, schematics. Yeah. So library planning. So you might have used a lot of libraries, right? Maybe in Node.js, in React, or even in Angular. So what are some of the thoughts that come to us when thinking about libraries? So a library can be a UI component library like Material or Bootstrap, or some kind of a configurable solutions, or simply some repeatable code which can be used across projects. You can keep it as a library, and you could use it. So it's not just open source libraries. Even in your enterprise or even in your own company, if you see some scope for repeatable solutions that can be kept aside as a library, you can take this and start creating the library, and you can pitch in this idea to your manager or team, right? So let's say when I had thought about creating a library, I have created something called breadcrumb library. So there were already existing solutions which didn't cater to my needs. So I had tweaked in and added a few more functionalities and created and published my own library. And also I did one more thing called based on a dynamic JSON, we need to present a different form components with different variety of layouts. So that can be a library idea, right? So when you think about the library idea, let's say you all have an idea, whether it is going to be open source or in your own company, some library, right? Think about the name. So what's in the name? But name is important. Usual naming for Angular libraries is prefixed with ng or Angular, right? So that was for the 1.x. So when Angular 2 released, people started using ng2, then Angular 4, ng4, so which didn't go well. So that's when the community leaders or Angular core members come up and saying, don't use ng2 for, there's going to be different names which will be difficult to maintain. Let's call it simply ng. So if ng is taken by somebody else, let's use ngx or Angular x or simply Angular. So for my project, I couldn't get the name of ngx. They're all taken by somebody. So I thought about using xng. So that is also kind of, consistent with the Angular naming. So once you decide on the name, think about the API contract or design of your library. So design or API contract in the sense how the users are going to be interacted with your library. Maybe the input-output namings, or through a service you might want to expose few methods which might be public and you want to keep something internal which are private. So think about upfront so that you will have a good idea about it. so that you will introduce less breaking changes, if your library gets famous and going further. So that's about the planning. So you have a library name right now, and if you think your library name is so important, you can publish a demo 000 version also, so that library is under your name. So workspace setup. So Angular CLI helps us so much. I think it makes all of our lives easier, right? So in creating a Angular workspace. But when coming to the Angular library, we won't do it in a regular way. So usual way is to do it in the second, as shown in the second one. So usually you will say, let's say I get my library name as xng breadcrumb. I generate ng new xng breadcrumb. So what happens then? So yeah, so this will be your structure. You will this will be the default structure that gets created if you do in a default way. So there will be src with the name, and then you go ahead and try to generate a library with the same name, xng breadcrumb. So at the time you will get conflicts, right? So the first one is for the app, the second one is for the library. But you wanted to have the same name. Let's say first one is to have the same name, same library name in the GitHub. Second one is to have that particular name in the npm. So you might want to then, if you do it this way, you may need to rename the project names in the Angular JSON, and the structure also is not that good, because the core thing, which is the library, goes under projects, but the actual demo that goes under src. So I don't recommend doing it this way, but rather you can do it in the first way, where you can give create application equal to false, which will basically create Angular workspace without any projects in it, and then you can create an application and a library. So if you do it this way, it will come like this. Under the projects, you can nicely see xng breadcrumb and xng breadcrumb app. So app is for a demo app, right? So this is workspace initialization specific to library. And after that, so the other thing Angular build helps us with is, to build it specific to different kind of contexts or environments. So Angular can be used in a different set of contexts, right? It can be used on a front end with a package JSON directly importing, or on the node side in case of Angular Universal. So that will be imported in a different way using a required syntax. Or even this can be used in let's say online playgrounds out there, right? So there they can be used as direct scripts. In that case, it has to be a single bundle. Your entire library has to be a single bundle. So Angular already by default helps us with that in bundling to the different formats. So here if you see, there are bundles, there are ECMAScript 2015, and which is basically ES6, and then ES5 format, and also it has the TypeScript typings. Where is it? So yeah, xng breadcrumb d.ts, which basically plays nice with the TypeScript. So all the support comes with by default from the Angular, right? So that's where Angular package format helps us. So once you think about once you created the workspace, and this is by default done by the Angular, you just initialize the Git and push everything so that you can track everything from the start, right? So having a good commit and good commit messages will be important, and tracking right from the start would be important. So while doing local development, you might need some helper scripts, and you might want to do some tweaks. So these are some of them. So you can watch the library and app together while developing in the local, and also you want to test your library before publishing, right? So for that, you might want to use npm link. So when you do npm link, it kind of creates a symlink in your local, and it points to your local library instead of the one in the npm. So this is so small. So if you see, this is the library format, right? And it has a package JSON where you would specify P dependencies. So most common things are Angular core and Angular common. Since my library is also dependent on router, I have specified router. And the good practice is to use here you want to specify which Angular versions your library is compatible with. Usually it is a good idea to keep it in between some versions. Let's say I think my library will play nicely with between 6 and 9. So I have mentioned it as between 6 and 9. So that is one idea. And few more things you need to observe here is the public API. So the public API is the one which indicates what all exports are available from your library. So by default, service, component, and module are used. And if you have any kind of pipes or directives or any other kind of files, you can export it here. And Angular, when building, it looks at it and it nicely builds to the final library package. And yeah, those are few things. So another important thing we always forget to do, or lack of doing, is documentation, right? So we might write code and we think that this is the best code, so it doesn't need documentation. Even I had the idea, right? Whenever some people are giving comments, I say that the code is so good, why do you need the comments? But it won't be for us also. For the same person who has written, maybe after 6 months or so, you forget what you have done. So it's a good idea to write comments as well as documentation. Documentation meaning for the library is a good README. So I am showing my own documentation. So yeah, if you see what all we expect in a README, right? Maybe a quick start, so that somebody new wants to try. Quick start, everybody knows, right? If some library has quick start, you are more likely to try it. And then a demo of how your library can be used, and user can, instead of doing all the things, he can go and check there. And then usage and API, and maybe once they did the quick start, what are the regular ways of using your library. And then badges. So badges are these are the badges. So badges gives you a nice feeling. Let's say in this case the tests are passed, NPM version is this, and MIT license version. So license is so important. So and the deployment is success. So these are some of the badges. You can add more based on the need and all that. You can also include code coverage and different kind of badges over there. What is it? You just need to see. First one is Circle here, right? First one is okay. You just need to update the README. That's it. So each of them are services, right? NPM. Okay. So one thing is in package JSON, you can mention the license as MIT, and also you can mention this as license here. If you see, okay, the network is slow. So this is MIT license. So by default, when you generate a project, you won't get this. So maybe if you go to settings, you will get it somewhere in the options. So in settings, if you check, you can add the license from the web itself. So one more thing is having a good change log. So how different versions of your library, if they have introduced the breaking changes. So that's a good idea. And we are also going to automate the change log going further. And then issue template. And okay. So issue template looks something like this. So how you want to have your users report a bug to you? How you want your users to report a feature to you? in case when they report a bug, you may expect a sample online application through Stackbase or something else, right? So you might create these issue templates. So whenever users are creating bugs or issues on your GitHub, they get this template and they may have to fill it. So that's one more good idea. And the last thing is a development guide and contribution guidelines. Let's say some other people wants to contribute to your project. It's a good idea to how they can start developing locally and contribute back to you. So that's about documentation. And if you see, I have taken so much effort in creating a demo app for this project, which is basically breadcrumbs library. And whenever you change your routes, the breadcrumbs are going to change. So in case of add, you might want to specify it as new, and all of that. Few use cases you can showcase it as a demo. So another important point is automating everything that is possible in for your project. And CICD doesn't have to be the work of DevOps these days. Even we as a front-end developers for our projects, we may have to do it on our own. And there are so many open source tools that are so good and are so easy to set up that we should start using them. So, as part of CICD or automation, right? So you may want to set up the linting. Let's say there are multiple people working on your project. So there might be styling or styling differences between their IDEs or their way of coding, right? So it's a good idea to set up common styling across the project and make it as part of the pre-commit or pre-push hook, so that whatever the code goes into the Git repo is under the common syntax and styling. So for that you can use Husky. Yeah, Prettier is the one that gives a very good styling, and we have TSLint by default provided Bangalore to check against some of the common rules. And you can use Husky and linstaged and some pre-commit hooks, so that before the code goes into your Git repo, it will be under the common syntax. So how you would do it? So I have done something like this. This is the only thing that need to be done. So before committing, I'm just doing a check and staging those files. And similarly, you can add any other hooks for push as well. And where do you set up all these things? Let's say once you push your code, you want to test the code. You first want to build the code and then test the code. If both of that gets succeeded, you may want to publish it to NPM, and your demo app is there. You may want to publish it to somewhere else. So all of this you need to do it in the CI server, right? So in a regular enterprise, you might be using Jenkins. So with the problem with the Jenkins is you have to have your own server. But if you use open source tool like this Circle CI, Travis, or even recently GitHub Actions, you can set them up so easily. And my preference is Circle CI. So what happens? So whenever you push some code to Git, right, through webhooks, your Git will notify the particular CI server, and that server runs whatever you have told it to do so. So how that works, we'll see. And out of all this process, authentication tokens are important, because these are the different services interacting together. So you have to provide them authentication and authorization tokens at a granular level, so that they can do certain tasks on behalf of you. So yeah, Circle CI uses the primary thing is you need to add a file like this .circleci and config.yaml, and this might look little V2 if you are looking at the first time, but the documentation is so good, so you can set it up in just like 10 minutes. Just go through that once. And how do we release, how do we version our library releases, right? Okay. Okay, how do we version our library releases? There might be major, minor, patch releases, or even pre-releases, right? So we as a developers may have different ideas. Let's release today, or let's release tomorrow the major version. But when we use some kind of a library which does automate these things, it doesn't have to be dependent on us based on our commits. Let's say in a commit I have mentioned, like usually you can mention like type, scope, and subject, then body. So type can be one of these things. So let's say fit usually is for a new feature, and fix for a fix, and there are different styles. Usually if you see any of the good open source projects like Angular or React or some of them, so they will have these kind of commit messages, and based on the commit message they will decide whether to make a major publish or minor publish. So for publishing a library, and here we are publishing the library from the CI server, right? So we need to get the NPM token. Right. We need to publish to NPM, so we need to create a token and give to the Circle CI so that it publishes on behalf of us. Similar for the Netlify. If you don't know about the Netlify is a very good static site hosting for your portfolios or demo apps like this. So you would create a Netlify token and you would keep that in the Circle CI, and Circle CI just invokes, deploy this through some script. So at the end of schematics is another newest addition, not newest, maybe it's almost a year that have been introduced. So Angular gives us opinionated architecture, right? So schematics are the benefits of it, I can say. So using schematics we can extend CLI. So if you have seen, you can add some of the libraries using ng-add, right? So you can make your library like that. So using schematics, it's a bonus to have it for your library. So this is a final flow that we are going to have. We do a git commit, and Husky intercepts your commit and does the styling, and then pushes to your GitHub, and in GitHub notifies to the Circle CI that some event has occurred. So the event is push event. So Circle CI reads your this configuration file, circleci.config, and does the series of steps that we are told to do. So here I have mentioned, like, first test it, then release it, git release it, which is through automated release using semantic versioning. So Circle CA has to update your versions and release tags. So we'll use GitHub token for it, and then if that succeeds, publish to NPM using NPM token, and after that publish it to Netlify using Netlify token. So finally, I'm gonna take a minute for the demo. So what we do is we just commit, and we'll see all this automation in effect. So these are some random thing that I'm doing. So I consider this as those are the shortcuts for git add and git commit. So I would say feat setting default, okay, something like that. So you can see Husky got executed, and I'll do npm run version. So this does a lot of things. So I have this npm run version script, which basically identifies your commits between the previous version release and this release, and decides to do what kind of a release it wanted to do. So yeah, after I ran this, it updated the version to 3.4.0. Earlier it was 3.3.0, and it also updated the changelog to 3.4.0, And if you see so latest commit 39 seconds ago, and you see the changelog has been updated to 3.4.0, and then in the package also it has updated, and it has created a release on behalf of us 3.4.0. And what happens in the Circle CI? The flows the flows whatever we have defined gets invoked, and these flows are still running. So once they are run, so it publishes to the npm as well as demo site to the Netlify, whatever we have configured. So that's the demo. So yeah, you can find me at Twitter as code async. So weird name, but I don't have anything else there. So everywhere else I will be available as Uday Vunnam. And if you want these slides, you can check the slides at that link. And the demo project also, you can use it as template project if you want to. And I'll be waiting for your feedback over that link.